Hey, we're live. Welcome to the Money Lap Podcast. I'm Parker Kligerman, joined as always by my buddy, Landon Cassill, in Iowa. I'm in North Carolina today. And on today's show, we're going to talk flipping race cars, flipping off teammates, and fucking fines. All that and more on Money Lap. But as always, we start with the PR lap. That made you laugh, Landon.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I couldn't see anything. Didn't have my glasses with me. Second of all, anyways, let's go. Let's
move on. We start with the PR lap. I did race
Isn't that
again
how the music goes?
first time in 3 weeks, so we do get to talk a little bit of racing. Just a quick recap of my weekend, the Xfinity Series. We finished 11th. Not our best day. It was one of those days we threw a lot at it. We got stage points in stage one. If the caution late in stage doesn't come out, I think we finished like 5th in the stage, 5th or 6th. But we were so-so. I think all the cars from Welcome weren't great. You know, this is that low horsepower package with the normal intermediate downforce. And I think a lot of us tried too hard to be low downforce when it probably the best situation was just to be high downforce and have the car that could race really well. And in doing so, we just didn't quite have the speed I think we hoped to have. So that was unfortunate. We still got 11th place finish. We had some good strategy at the end that we took tires, and if the rain kind of held us up. But we pitted from 11th to put tires on, and we got back to 11th. So solid in that sense. I think that package, we can probably talk about it. We'll talk about it more in the Xfinity section of the pod, but not a big fan of that package. I don't think
When are we
going
to cover the penalty report?
That's in the Xfinity section. We'll get into penalties. I mentioned fines. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to hear about the penalty that we got, L1 penalty, stay tuned. We'll do that in the Xfinity section, which will be after Cup. So you got to stick around, if you want to hear that sort of thing.
I'll stick around for that.
Okay, that's good. I was hoping you would. All right, so reviews-wise, we had no new written reviews on Apple. But this is disappointing.
Tragic.
And it's really tragic because I've seen our listener numbers continue to creep up as of late. We've hit some of our highest, most listened to episodes in the last couple of episodes, which means there's all sorts of new people. So if you are watching us on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple, go to Apple and just leave us a review. 5 stars. We'll put it on this podcast. You'll be featured here if you make it really great. But anytime there's 5-star one, we put it on here. We want to get to 200. We're 173. Let's make it happen. On Spotify, we did have some reaction out there. I'll start with the first one from Mick Coolio. Great name, by the way. Absolutely love this pod. Parker is really cool to meet in person. I wonder why I took this one. Met him at Indy in 23, and he signed my drawing of his Portland car and took a pic with me. Love that story.
Anything else there, Miculio?
Yeah.
Just that's it? Just
he didn't
Parker's
tell you
really
that
cool
I
to
paid
meet in
for his kids'
person,
tuition
met him.
to college.
That's it?
as well. Yeah. So
Okay. Well, yeah. I guess I'm chopped liver.
I think we found Parker's Spotify profile.
yeah, that's a good point, Josh. Thanks.
Hurricane said, love the insight this pod gives. Want to thank you, Parker, for sliding me a hero card at Sonoma in 2023 because due to traffic, I was late to the autograph session and wanted to ask Landon if he plans or hopes to get back in an Xfinity car soon or any series for that matter. I would love to. I would absolutely love to. I am not going to race without a sponsor. I want a good sponsor.
A sponsor or
got to make it happen.
Or just get really wealthy and pay for it yourself.
That could work too.
That's the dream.
That's one way to do it.
That's the dream.
A couple good ones on YouTube here.
Hello. Wait, this one's Rain Dog. Oh, you want this one?
Chad from Spotify. Yeah, it's Rain Dog 38, but it might be Chad from Spotify on.
Oh no! Oh no!
So,
it is Chad from Spotify.
He's just hopping platforms here. Hello, boys. Pod is amazing. Hope you enjoyed the break. Welcome back, Chad from Spotify. Okay, we're piecing it all together. Rain Dog is also Chad from Spotify. Great name on Spotify. By
Soon
the way.
we'll know everyone's actual name and their anonymous internet name. It's kind of a new thing,
Parker,
to
you
know
take these
things.
next couple. We get an email. We had an email review too. We have another YouTube review, but also an email review. I'll let you take these.
Yeah, this is UGA fan 12132. Landon got me with the transition again. I did not see that coming. I thought he was going to say you could have promoted the pod with a vlog or something. talking about your transitions, you did get a lot of feedback about the transitions this past weekend. Well done on the ad read. Even some friendly in some of our group chats that we're in, they were, excited about your transition. So that's good. Do you want to take this email? This is great. By the way, if you want to send us an email, it's just friends@themoneylap.com.
I will take the email, but now I have to navigate back to our show notes in order to do it because I was preparing myself for the transition. But this is from Keith Patterson. I guess I won't read his email address, even though we're used to reading their usernames.
We just totally doxed this guy. Sorry.
Oh my god! I just realized that in real time that I was about to read his email address.
Hey, don't send us any of your sensitive information. It may or may not be read on air.
Right. Patterson's social security number 551. Hey Keith. Parker and Landon. Glad the pod is back after the break. Question on rain delays and hotels. Oh, that's a good question. Do teams just book Sunday night girls every weekend and I'm sorry, I'm reading this all the time. Every weekend and check out early if it doesn't rain? What? Sunday night girls? Otherwise, I can imagine a rain delay causes all sorts of logistical issues. All right, I got to start over. I need to read this to myself before I read it on the pod. Question on rain delays in hotels. Do teams just book Sunday night girls? That says girls, right?
I know, but he meant rooms.
I think there's probably some people that do that.
There might be some Sunday night girls.
And then check out early if it doesn't rain. Otherwise, I can imagine a rain delay causes all sorts of logistical issues. Unless they just assume enough fans don't stay in the hotels will have availability. Well, Keith, what I typically do is I just book the room if I need it. The girl thing is more of, if my wife's there, then I've had her there all weekend. If she's not, I just go without. So, but if the race gets rained out, I don't. It's just kind of it's a case by case, and every track and every scenario is different. To be honest with you, a lot of teams, like for Bristol weekends, because Bristol has rained out so much and the rooms are hard to get. I think sometimes the teams will get the room the extra night automatically, or they have a really good relationship with the hotels and they'll be kind of like first come first serve on the rooms, or they'll have always, I don't know. It just the better the teams I've been with, it seems like they always have an option. Rarely have I been completely hung out to dry on finding a room. But I have been with teams several times over the course of my career where we absolutely stayed at a different hotel on Sunday night than we stayed the rest of the week. So that the logistics teams and the travel coordinators had to do a lot of coordinating to get rooms aligned. So
I saw it this weekend, by the way. So this past weekend when it got rained out and pushed to Monday, I stayed at the NBC hotel. Because a lot of times on these weekends I do both. I usually stay at the NBC team, so I don't have to move hotels, and it's just sort of it's a logistical nightmare normally to have to move around. And so I was there at the bar with the producer of NASCAR and NBC, and here rolls in all the Stewart Haas teams at like 2-3 hours after the race got canceled. They all started rolling in, and they obviously hadn't stayed there the night before. All the drivers were coming in, so that was funny. Obviously they had to just figure it out, and they have to figure it out. We stayed about 50 minutes from the track at Michigan, but sometimes we do.
I've had a lot of weekends. Michigan's another one where our travel coordinator will just let me know, and by the way, we have the room for Sunday night too, in case
just in case. Yep.
Right.
So they definitely do that. I think they try. They try to be smart at some places. Also, at the bottom of Keith Patterson's email, he said, "Got that upgrade, gang." # got that upgrade gang.
I think that's
I like that.
I think that's baked into his signature too.
Oh, that might be. Oh my goodness. Wow. Should we give him out his address, his home address as well, or?
I can't believe I almost read this guy's email.
Thank you, Keith. Great question. Once again, if you want to send us an email, friends@themoneylap.com.
Well, you know what? speaking of giving out addresses, if there's somebody you should give your address out to, Parker,
Who's that?
it is spoilerdiecast.com because it is coming up. I know Christmas seems like a long ways away, but it comes up fast. It is the fall season is upon us. The racing season is winding down. You better get your diecast locked in. If you are a racing enthusiast looking for high-quality diecast and apparel, look no further than spoilerdiecast.com, one website that you should absolutely give all of your personal information to, including your credit card number, because they are one of the fastest-growing companies in the industry. What sets them apart, Parker?
What is that?
Well, they pride themselves on exceptional service. All their orders ship either same or next day, ensuring you get your hands on your favorite products in no time. They have free shipping on orders over $20, so you get a smooth, affordable shopping experience with SpoilerDiecast.com. And they have over 1,100 unique products currently in stock. So NASCAR, IndyCar, F1, dirt, sprint cars, a little bit of everything. They are growing their inventory, growing everything. And yeah, you can actually shop for diecasts the way that we did when we were kids at the shopping mall, but do it online, give them your information, and they will send you cool stuff if you exchange it for money.
My goodness. That was a hell of a transition. I'm pumped. I'm actually on SpoilerDiecast.com right now. I don't even know why. I'm just here. You were so great and compelled me so much so to type it into my browser and go to SpoilerDiecast.com. I mean, it's saved as a favorite, but I still wanted to go there. So that was great. Let's talk racing. We mentioned we would do that on this podcast. We do occasionally talk racing. And we start with the Cup Series. And the biggest news post-Richmond, once again, and post-Michigan. We'll dive into the actual Michigan racing, but just this, we're recording this on Wednesday, August 21st at around 4:30 in the afternoon. The appeals panel decided to not overturn Austin Dillon's penalty of being removed from the playoffs for his win and, the way he went about winning Richmond. They did, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, they did overturn the penalty for the spotter and reduced it to 1 week, basically.
Yeah, which, they turned it down. It isn't the final note in this chapter, though. They still have one more appeal process that they could go through with the final appeals officer.
Hell yeah, one more. So
are they gonna? I'm sure they'll do that then, right?
I would have to, if they put the effort
They've confirmed
together.
it, yeah. They're going to do it.
So they're going to do it. So this isn't over. And, rightfully so. I mean, it's just such a big deal. We talked about it last week after he won the race. It was the actual number I got given to me about his, the financial ramifications was $1.8 million for the team just in the charter and prize money, let alone bonuses from the sponsors, bonuses from Chevy, so on and so forth. So there is a lot tied up in this, and they're going to fight, all the way to the end, I would think.
That's $1.8 million this year.
Yes, that's this year.
The charter money has a 3-year rolling average to it. So
plus bonuses. Remember bonuses for sponsors. They have those
right. But just talk about charter dollars. The $1.8 million. It's about $100,000 a spot, I think.
Yes.
So
and they were
the difference between 30th. Where's he at?
He was 32nd in points.
32nd and 16th. So that's where they're coming up with $1.8 million. It's about $100,000 a spot in owners' points.
Yep.
But then there's a what am I trying to say? Down for the next 3 years, that at worst case scenario, 16th in points has kind of a weighted average on how much charter money the 3-car earns over the next 3 years.
Yep.
So it makes a big difference. So it's actually more than $1.8 million over the next 3 years, I think.
So I also would like to say that I felt like they had a chance with this appeal. And my reasoning is that I just felt like there was a reasonable way to create an area of doubt on the intentionality of the 11 hit. Right, the 22. There's just no way you take that back. But the hit on the 11, which I think really sent this over the top. Right, I think there's an avenue just from past race finishes and past incidents to go and explain how that most likely was a racing incident, an accident. Now you were in that position because of what you did at the 22, but and how you drove that corner. But that doesn't take away the fact that we see this often racing, two cars connect at the same point, going for the same real estate. It's unfortunate how it comes together, but there was probably room. I'm just saying room. I'm not saying whether.
I'm just laughing at going for the same real estate is
excuse me.
Generous.
It's generous, but I'm using terms. I'm trying to speak in a way that I believe if you were trying to make a case, right? There's gray area there to have made a case. That's my point. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying that's the point. You can call me out all you want,
that
bro.
Tank get blown up on a drone strike. They were just going for the same real estate.
Well, that's been intentional, though. Well, no, that would be intentional. There's no wiggle room there unless you were like, hey, we were actually trying to hit this, fortified base, and we ended up hitting a tank. And it's like, well, that was a bit of a miss. We didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. No, but there was wiggle room. There was wiggle room in there. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, they didn't get it. They didn't find the wiggle room. The appeals board did not agree. So we'll see what happens in the final appeals. And it
What's
seems
interesting
that the final
about
appeal officer
NASCAR's
is
final appeals process. Oh
Yep.
gosh, I'm interrupting you. I'm sorry. It's interesting about their process is now it just comes down to one final appellate, which is Bill Mullis.
Yeah, owner of Langley Speedway. So,
Have we've seen the final appellate officer overturn this before, right?
I can't keep up. Josh is like an encyclopedia of this stuff.
Well, let me go find out. Let me see if I can find any information.
Help us out here. I can't honestly appeals and this and like the infraction stuff. When it's in the moment, I can kind of get into like all the nitty gritty, and then the second it's done, I forget everything, even the rules.
Well, that's it's an interesting process. I don't know if I am very optimistic for the 3-car. I think that NASCAR sent their message. I think the appeals panel, their statement I thought was pretty strong. And I would imagine that Bill Mullis, the owner of Langley Speedway, a short track, who probably has a lot of experience with making balls and strike calls on driver aggression at a local level, grassroots level, who understands, NASCAR's desire for driver conduct. Probably would be interesting to see what he does here, but
yep.
So the last time the final appeal officer had any influence I can find is in, oh God, I don't know when this was, but it was with Junior Motorsports and Noah Gragson in the 9 Dash for Cash disqualification, it looks like. And he overturned penalties. So
is that when he spun everyone out or spun out Sage at Road America?
No, this is 20. It looks like 2021. And I'll find more information out for you on this.
Yeah, you keep searching. Let's move on. Anyway, we'll see. We'll keep tracking that. Let's talk some racing. We did mention it. We raced at Michigan. It was on a Monday after being rained out after 49 laps on Sunday for the Cup Series. Tyler Reddick won it, and he had it in hand with about 10 to go. There was a late caution. That was a bit of a suspect caution in terms of Martin Truex getting into the wall and, causing maybe a caution that wasn't needed to be a caution. Nonetheless, the best car and late in the race probably still won. That's Tyler Reddick, 45 team. They've been on a hell of a tear. I think he has the best average finish in the last 7 races. He's finished second multiple times. He finally got that monkey off his back. Pretty impressive win. I think the big loser this weekend, though, in a lot of ways, is his teammate, Bubba Wallace. Had a car that was arguably faster, at least at the beginning of the race. Was doing a tremendous job, but his team did something really interesting, Landon. I want your opinion on this. I know we're 3 days past the race, or 2 days now, but I think this was really fascinating in that, they came into that race, I believe it was 3 points above the cut line, and he got to the lead in stage 1, and they had a late race caution, and he was going to win the stage easily. They have this late race caution or late stage caution. They could have stayed out and most likely just easily won the stage. They elect to pit He gets back to fourth, gets stage points after pitting. But this pitting, put them back in the pack. They had to drive through. So then in stage 2, once again, he's in the top 3. They decide to pit again with a late caution in the stage, which puts him back in the midst of the pack. There's a wreck. He gets involved in that wreck. They, end up, I think, 1 point out now or whatever. But on a day where they probably had a winning car, they went the winning strategy, which you had to do, right? If you want to be in conversation with the winning strategy, and forgoed all these points opportunities. And I thought that was really fascinating because that's something that this deal, when you're at that bubble in those last few races, you have to make these decisions, which are take points or go for overall finish. And it's really fascinating to see how the teams elect to do it. And I talked to Booty Barker, and he was like, look, we evaluate that. It was a really tough call, especially the stage 1 one, but we took that chance because we felt like in that moment, hey, we've got a car that can win this race. And that's just so crazy. Now, I don't know any form of motorsports that makes you make that decision. None.
I understand the call. Or I'm sorry. Let me be even more specific. I understand the strategy, and I agree with the strategy on paper and in preparation for the race because Michigan is historically like horrible track position, dirty air, can't get through the field. So I think that it's that strategy. It was obviously well thought out. It was well prepared. I am not going to knock them for making that call in stage 1, right? Like you're sticking to your strategy. You're seeing the game plan.
And they netted out with a bunch of points, and they beat all the guys that they were up against on the cut line.
I think that the fact they drove it back to 4th should have raised some alarm bells on that pit box, and maybe allowed them to call an audible to be like, hey, we might have a car here to do what we need to do.
And win the stage in stage 2.
Win the stage,
and then
get the extra stage points, and be in contention to win the race.
So on the flip side of that, which happened this weekend, was Ty Gibbs and the 54 car. They went towards the stage points in both stages. So they stayed out in stage 1. I don't know if he netted stage points in that, or maybe a couple. And then in stage 2, did it again, netted a lot of stage points, and then had that caution shortly after in stage 3, which basically netted them all this, or it fell perfectly in their strategy to allow them to do one more stop. And so they basically found themselves just leapfrogging everyone into that track position and getting the stage points. And I think he had like a 40-some-odd point day and ended up going from plus 18 to plus 36 or something going into Daytona. So it was a massive day, and just sort of the two flip sides of that. But I thought it was really fascinating because I was also covering these guys. It was 42-point day for Ty Gibbs. Josh, let me know. I thought that was interesting because I just sat there and I was like, no motorsport in the world makes you make this decision as you're in the midst of it to do this.
I don't like stages.
What I'm saying is like you can knock stages and saying they're manufactured drama and all this stuff, but at the end of the day, like that's a pretty wild thing to be in this position of having to make these choices in the split second of your season on the line. So it's crazy.
Maybe stages in big tracks or maybe stages in long races like cup races are a good thing. I felt like I got in a rhythm in the Xfinity Series where stages just they seem like the races are too short.
Yes.
You don't have enough sets of tires, and so the stages just end up taking out some strategy.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, the scenarios that we're talking about in the Cup Series, specifically on Sunday at Michigan, are proof that stages don't necessarily kill strategies across the board all the time, right? There's still some strategy alive and well, and there's plenty of races without stages where there are no strategies, right? It's just it's the way the cautions fall. It's pretty straightforward. So, this whole scenario and talking about this kind of gets me excited about the stages that we had, and I love seeing those decisions being made. I love being able to talk about them. I love Booty Barker. I think he's a great crew chief. I think he's done a phenomenal job with Bubba. I would love to have a cup of coffee with him over this scenario and ask him how tempted he was to
You could invite him on your
change
podcast.
his strategy, right? Because I think, in my opinion, he should have changed his strategy. What?
You could invite him onto your podcast.
Oh yeah, let's do that.
Hey man, by the way, you have a podcast.
I want to change. I want to see how close he was to, or how tempted he was to change his strategy on Sunday. Because in my opinion, you go into the race. I know I'm repeating myself, but you go into that race with this strategy, and it's a great strategy. And they probably didn't expect to have as good of a car as they did, right?
Yep.
And the first time you do it, you give up the stage win, but then you see your driver drive back to fourth, and you go, "Oh, let's maybe we just win the second stage and then win the race." Like, let's
drive our way back through.
Yeah, like let's not get tricky, right? Because the risk that you have with that strategy is you put yourself off sequence of the rest of the field. You bury your driver in the field at late race, late stage restarts. There's weird risks that happen there. You're always at risk when you restart mid of the pack or just being in a race in general. But like sometimes just running the race as the leader and as the dominant car and winning your races and then winning your stages and then pitting for tires and keeps you out of trouble. Right? It puts you in control. You're the first guy on tires. You're just in the safest spot. So I don't know. I'm curious how tempted he was to call an audible. Obviously he didn't, but
well, historically that track, the way with the stages play, the field flips like once or twice in the race because of that and because of where the fuel is in the stages and such. And so it's really fascinating. And what you're trying to do is just basically get to a point that you can connect into one stop in stage 3. And some of those cars, like the 54, the 6, they needed that timely caution. They got it. That allowed them to connect to one stop and basically just gave them a ton of track position from staying out in stage 2.
One last thought on this, and we can move on. The first thing I'm going to say is just because you short pit that second stage, there's no guarantee the cautions are going to fall when you want them to fall in stage 3, right? Like that's a long enough stage. There's 2 pit stops, or at least one, right? There's 1 pit stop in stage 3. There's no guarantee those cautions are going to fall when you need them to fall. So just because you short pitted stage 2 doesn't mean the whole stage 3 is going to end up the way you wanted it to end up, right? But that those guys have enough data and their computers are telling them when the cautions are most likely to fall.
Yep.
Right. And that probably played a big role in that initial strategy and why they stuck with that strategy as opposed to listen to, a podcaster, in my opinion, especially a driver podcaster.
Yeah.
Not a race engineer. But
I know
not only are they looking at like flipping the field, they're looking at the historical when those cautions fall and when the cautions are most likely to fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
I don't know.
It's all part of the game, and that place especially is pretty heavy with strategy. Just one other thing that caught my eye in that race I thought was just badass was Randall Burnett and the 8 team for Kyle Busch, who brought him down in that early caution stage 3 from outside like the top 5, or basically he was just outside the top 5, and had him put fuel and tires in so that they could do one more stop. But then when they did that one stop, it allowed them to do a super short stop and do a right side tires only. So he vaulted to the lead. He couldn't hold on to it, still netted a top 5, but he gave it everything he's got up there with this like a car that obviously was not as fast as competitors on, older left side tires. And I just thought it was so badass because I was like, all right, that was cool. And Steve Letarte, who does such an amazing job of plotting the strategy for every damn car on the racetrack all at once. It's unbelievable. I know people who listen to this podcast hear me wax poetic about Steve Letarte, but he's just insane. If you could hear the background to what he's doing and what he's doing on air, it'd blow your mind. But he called it so early on that he was doing that, and it worked out perfectly. It was awesome. I thought it was poetic in a lot of ways to see someone, jump the field like that. Like he jumped the field, Randall Burnett and that 8 team. Shout out to Ben Lynch, who's the engineer there now as well. So pretty cool to see. I thought that was fun. I've never gotten, that's the kind of strategy where as a driver, I feel like a couple times I've been on in my life where like we do something kind of like that and you get that track position, and it can be like you're like this is gonna be hard, but for the time that it works, you're like, we're legends. This is awesome.
We talk about how tight the field is nowadays, and that's a feature, right? It's a good thing. Sometimes it feels like a bug because the field is so tight that passing doesn't happen. But when you have 25 cars that run this close in lap times, and then they're that close to each other going onto pit road, and their pit stops are all that consistent and close and everything, you can see that big of a flip, right? Those many spots get gained on pit road with different strategies, 2 tires, no tires, whatever. So that's cool. I've always been a fan of Randall Burnett. I've always thought he was really good.
He's pretty sharp. I think he's one of the top ones. Anyway, that's a lot of the racing stuff. One topic that obviously has been brought up since this past weekend is the idea of start times. In that, this race this past weekend on Sunday probably gets halfway if the race is started a little earlier. Now, I think a lot of times people blame the TV networks for this and holding to late times, that sort of stuff. I would like it to be known it is not a single source decision. There is multiple parties involved. It is NASCAR. It is the tracks. If you think about it, if you imagine moving a race 1 hour, say, right, that's been said that it's going to be started at a certain time for months. The crowd for Michigan this past weekend was the largest crowd they've had in years. I talked to the track president on Saturday, and he told me the crowd was going to be immense, and it was huge on Sunday. And I think I saw something like maybe the largest since 2007 or something. It was huge. Imagine telling all of those people with a couple hours' notice, hey, we're going to start this thing an hour earlier. What do you think that does for traffic flow? For the for the idea that they're all going to get in? So it's a mass, there's 50, 60, 70,000 people. I don't know how many, but there's a huge amount that you have to suddenly decide, hey, we're going to change this whole thing. We're going to tell the cops, the local county, the traffic
You just
deal.
made me realize something.
Well, hold on. So I'm going
Go
through this, and so I see, I've heard some podcasts this week and seen some comments like, well, just move it, man. You could just move it. And it's like, bro, this is such a ginormous event to just move. That you have to just think a little smarter than that. Yes, and then on the other flip side of that, people are pissed about late start times often, and I just can tell you straight up, and this is just from working TV, but the numbers are numbers. Every hour that you go later into an evening on a Sunday,
on Sundays,
on a weekday, even the amount of TVs that are just turned on, is ginormous per each hour. So, of course, if I'm NASCAR, if I'm the media rights holder, I'm going to say, hey, guys, we'd like to start this thing kind of late because there's going to be a lot more people possibly watching, which means our ads sell for more, which means we make more money, which means we can eventually pay you, NASCAR, more money, which means the teams make more money, and you fans get to watch more racing.
Not necessarily. I mean, Jim France just puts it all in his pocket.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about that part. Well, jet fuel and yacht fuel is tough. But nonetheless, I'm saying we're joking, by the way. My point is, it's a massive thing. What's that?
He has several pockets.
Yeah. Anyway, my point of the monologue and the rant was just to say that it's not so simple, and I am in the rare position of being one of those people that has been able to see many sides of this, and I can tell you that it's just not simple. And there's a lot of people that want to, there's a lot of entities that have their own wishes, but the wish for everyone is that a race happens on time and it goes to its full distance, and I think, that is, but it's not always so simple to make big changes.
That's a great point. Great points. And you do offer good experience. You offer experience on that Denny doesn't have, right? Working in TV for so long and driving, that's super helpful. It kind of made me realize something. When NASCAR first sort of showed these signs of flexibility with the start times, with impending weather, I think they even made like an official announcement around it. It might have been the last TV deal. It was like a right that they reserved with the last TV deal was to move the start times with 24 hours notice. Does it feel to you like they did it a couple times and then they haven't really done it since?
No, I mean, we've had it happen a lot, and it can be 5 to 15 minutes happens often, and that will happen, definitely with weather area, and it's, that might be like the most that that morning they can suddenly adjust with the track, right, and the traffic patterns in the local county and that sort of thing. Like, there's so many ramifications, so many parts and pieces of this whole thing. So that I would say, I don't know the exact number, but I would say often that I've done the TV stuff, I get there, to the production meeting, and it's like, hey, we're moving up 15 minutes. It's go, go, go. The pre-race has now been cut by 15 minutes. Here's why, boom, 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 boom. Here's what we're doing, and it's like, okay, got it. So that
the last time, Landon, that race time was moved up was in June at New Hampshire. They moved it up 30 minutes.
Hey, and I did pit reporting on that one, so I know that.
I agree with you, and hey, I'm flexible with the changing of times in industry, and people have different lifestyles now than they did 10 years ago, right? I will still it's core memories for me, and being in the good old days of the early 2010s when I was racing Cup in 2011, 2012, when we had noon start times on the East Coast.
Oh, and that's pretty wild.
And I don't know. I guess I'm wondering how many noon East Coast start times we had, but like noon start times.
I thought it was 1 p.m. start times.
I think we
did that whole year that was like 1 p.m. start times, and then nobody watched.
That's what people have been harping, at least.
I can remember. Again, this is totally selfish, but this is just my experience and why it was special at those times. I can remember some of those races where it was short flights as well.
Yep.
So you had like 1 hour flights back to Charlotte, and running a full Cup race, flying home in the sun, and like still having the sun up on a Sunday afternoon, like getting home by 6:30 or 7 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon, and being able to, go out to dinner or, have it like an evening at home. It was like coming home from work. It was awesome.
So on Monday, we had the 11 a.m. start time, and it was only 300 miles because they'd done 49 laps the day before, and I had a 5:30 flight back, but a buddy of mine got a 3:30 flight back, and he made it. Actually, the director of NASCAR ABC, and so he was back before the sunset, and I was back by like 7, and we were both kind of like, that was pretty dope.
I mean, forget that it's Monday.
Personally, like just in terms of a competitor, I'm like, 1 p.m. start time. That sounds amazing. Like, sign me up. And I love when we have like early race days and that sort of stuff. That's the best.
I'm pretty sure
get it out of the way.
And this is like Jeff Gluck, Danny, all these guys that want these early start times. I don't blame them. And there isn't, when we say TV wants to start later, that's the corporate TV that pays the bills, right? There is nobody on the ground at a NASCAR race that doesn't want an early start time if they were purely voting for themselves.
Yeah.
So on the
also
flip
don't
side,
like
the worst races are night races. The worst ones.
The worst.
And then
I hate
the
night
worst
races.
of all
I hate
worst
staying up that
are
late.
Sunday night races.
Oh, that's just it's just the worst.
So
Great to watch at home though. Sunday night races, watching at home, badass. What was it? Richmond was a Sunday night race this past Richmond.
Yeah.
I loved that. That was the best. Like a 6 p.m. start Sunday night was the coolest thing ever as a viewer. I'd gotten home, I did something all day, and then get back, and I'm like, oh, NASCAR is on tonight. This is epic. I loved it. That was amazing.
So
More
Parker, you said that TV wants later start times and whatnot. Can we
not wants? It's just a fact. Well, no, it's just a fact. There's more TVs on.
Better for your.
Well, let me offer you the compromise that I've seen and hear what your perspective is on it. We can't figure out whether we don't want to adjust start times, 24 hours before. Can we just look at the sky and see if the track has lights and determine whether or not that should be a 1 p.m. start time or a 3 p.m. start time so that we're not going up against darkness?
It's a hell of an idea, Josh. I guess, yeah. Maybe that should be the metric. I guess that should be in the deal. Maybe they did put it in the deal. I don't know. I don't know if it's been mentioned, but it should seem like a smart thing. Josh, I thought you were going to pitch me on tarps. Everyone's been talking about
okay.
tarps on racetracks.
before the start of the podcast, I told Parker, if we're not going to invest in lights for tracks, can we at least get a tarp system? I mean, baseball's got it figured out. Like, come on, it's got to be cheap to maintain. Just go out to your local Walmart, grab all their tarps.
2 miles of tarp.
Yeah, they got to have at least 2 miles of tarp.
We did investigate this because one of my crew guys brought this up. He's like, there should be just a tarp that goes out from under the wall. And I was like, it's funny is that, these pools have these tarps that like go on a roller and then roll out over the pool and then come back and they're like super strong and everything. I was like, that sounds great, but what happens the first time that a 3,400-pound race car hits it at 180 miles an hour into the wall? And it was like, oh, I guess it would be broken. I was like, yeah, get back to the drawing board on this one.
Just put it on top of the concrete section. Just drag it over. It'll be fine.
Okay, yeah, maybe. I don't know. Hey, it's probably a lot of money to be made if you can tarp racetracks. We wouldn't lose it. No, you're muted, Landon. Landon, you're muted. Nope, he's still talking. Muted. Guys, this is the best thing ever. He doesn't realize. Now you're back.
I'm back.
What was that?
Sorry, I was muted. I was trying to tell you guys to move on from tarp conversation.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's talk flipping race cars. We mentioned it. Corey LaJoie flipped in the Cup race after contact with Noah Gragson down the backstretch. We also had a flip in the Xfinity race with Kyle Sieg, the first time in history that a blowover has occurred twice in one race weekend at a non-superspeedway track. That's thanks to Seth Eggert's chart that he keeps of all blowovers. Thank you, Seth. Let's talk about this for a second because, cars going in the air, I heard Jeff Burton say it on the broadcast as Corey LaJoie's car came to a rest. That is unacceptable. That is the feeling throughout the sport, is that cars shouldn't go in the air, right? We had 2 in 2 days. Now, one thing that Steve Letarte went into and that we were discussing even under break amongst ourselves on the TV broadcast was the immense wind, and that's a headwind down the backstretch, which means that if you're going 190 miles an hour and it's a 20-mile-an-hour headwind, you do the math, that's 210 miles an hour wind speed. So the thought process is that a lot of these are, these cars are designed to not go in the air at around 200 miles an hour, right? Now, 210, whatever, that's an immense amount of speed to try to control them. The flaps did deploy. It just didn't keep the car on the ground. So I'm sure NASCAR will be investigating this. It's not great to see that. But I just wonder, was it a bit of like the perfect storm, pardon the pun, of having this immense wind down the backstretch on both days and, those cars being turned at a high, when they're still going at a high rate of speed into that wind and being able to take off. Mm-hmm. Scientist Landon Cassill, please dive into this deep.
I don't know how scientific I can get on it. Other than I do think, we can talk about like the underbelly and things, but did they have the same headwind both days down the backstretch?
Yeah. Yep.
I would, not to just minimize the conversation and move on, but like I will tend to just say that in my experience in this sport and what we've watched NASCAR go through over the past several decades, really, to try to keep cars on the ground, it seems like that 200 miles per hour number is a number that NASCAR has had for a long time, that they're like, it's just hard to keep cars on the ground no matter what you do to them, no matter how they're built, if they're going 200, right? Yeah. And so if you're telling me that both Saturday and Sunday they had a 20-mile-an-hour headwind and those Xfinity cars going 185, 190 down the backstretch.
We were doing 175, actually.
175?
Well, in the draft, probably 180, 185.
So those with a headwind close to 200.
Yep.
You know, the Cup cars, same thing, 205, 210, air wind, or airspeed, I'm trying to say.
Yep.
Air wind. I just, like, we can say that's unacceptable. And I think that there's 100% improvements that can be made to the underbody of the car. I mean, it's kind of like shocking and right in front of you, and it's like, why did that car flip over while it's flipping through the air, and you see this like smooth underbody, and it's like, I'm pretty sure I can at least point to one thing, right, that contributed to that. So I don't disagree with that. You know, it's like I don't want to minimize the role that plays in it, but I also will say that we've driven a lot of different types of cars over the years, and trucks, and you know, next gen cars, and Gen 5, Gen 6, and we've seen them all fly through the air. And it just seems like, from NASCAR's perspective, when they're going 200 miles an hour, it's hard to keep them on the ground. Doesn't matter how they're built. It's just hard to keep them on the ground. So if that headwind was blowing 20 miles an hour and those cars, both Xfinity and the Cup cars, were, you know, the airspeed was over 200 miles an hour when they turned sideways, I don't know if there's a lot that NASCAR can do to keep them on the ground when they're going that fast.
And that's kind of my thought, too. You know, I know it's unfortunate to see it. It is a product of a full-bodied race car going 200 miles an hour, and that's always going to be a risk, because these cars are designed to create downforce going forwards, but if you flip them around, a lot of that stuff is suddenly exposed and creates lift, and that's just a fact. And that is a physics fact, and until we can defy physics, which we haven't been able to do, and we've all been trying for the last 30 years to defy physics in terms of dirty air, no one's figured it out. I just don't know how you're going to solve this. You know, slowing down is always an option, but, you know, one of the coolest things about Michigan now is it's the fastest racetrack we go to, 205 miles an hour into turn one. We don't see that anywhere, right? It's part of, if you want speed, there is risk. I think, you know, glad to see Corey okay. I watched his onboard that he posted on Twitter, which is just hardcore as hell, because he's like, it goes on forever, first of all. He has the wherewithal to put his visor back down as he goes towards the dirt. You see him holding the wheel forever and then realizing that's probably a bad idea. So he grabs his belts. It's a wild thing to watch, and the amount of dirt that comes in there. So I interviewed him right after in the care center, and he was covered in dirt all over his suit. And I was like, man. I was like, you all right? And he's like, yeah, I'm good. But like, whoa. I was like, yeah, that was quite a ride, dude. I texted him afterwards. I was like, you still okay? He's like, I'm good. I'm like, all right. That's scary, man. So it's just a product of these cars. It's just race cars going 200 miles an hour. You know, that's going to happen. So
it's hard to
we'll see if they can continue to make improvements, but that's a tough one. Shall we move on?
We can move on.
You looked inquisitive there for a second.
Well, I had one more thought and I was actually looking at what, you know, Josh put in the chat there, that it was the first non-super speedway blowover since 2000, which is not true.
You have a 2009 with Brad Keselowski.
Yeah.
Or 2010, but that was caused by...
well, it was a blowover nonetheless. That was kind of making me think. That's just like, it's interesting that we saw that both, you know, 2 weekends or 2 days in a row, but the restrictor plate package and that the racing style kind of can contribute to that for sure. Just the tight quarters and
definitely
and
on
the type
the
of
Xfinity
blocking
side
and everything that goes with that kind of racing. So
yeah, in the Xfinity side, you know, what happened with Kyle Sieg was he was a product of the 45 spinning off my bumper with a very nice bump draft that caused him into a tank slapper, which was unfortunate. But I'll just be honest, I don't know how anyone could possibly bump someone nicer, and I was already being pushed at the same time, so it's like this.
We weren't asking you to defend yourself.
No, I'm not. Once again, I'm not defending myself. I'm just putting out the facts. Landon Cassill, who go on your podcast, defend yourself, man. Jeez, what am I dealing with here? Look at this. Just getting called out all the time. Anyway, my point being, it was a product of that, and you know the Xfinity Series though was a super speedway package essentially, and so we're bump drafting, and so cars are going to get spun around at a high rate of speed because we're all running into each other.
Can I just say that as long as nobody's getting hurt, I don't mind seeing a blowover every once in a while. I mean, they kind of look cool.
Whoa! What a guy!
I mean, they kind of look cool.
Clip. That's gonna be the clip. I won't lie. I mean,
it looks badass. To be honest with you,
it looks cool. And whenever I go anywhere, like you meet people at a bar, like something, and they don't know much about NASCAR, and they're like, "Have you ever crashed? Have you ever a big one?" And it's like, "Yeah, go on YouTube and type Park Kligerman flip," and it's like, boom. There you go. They're like, "Whoa, you flipped over, dude!" It's like, "Yeah, how you doing?"
I need.
I did break my. I did snap a vertebrae though when I did that. So,
Jeez.
yeah, that's a fun story. I'll tell it another time. We don't have enough time in this podcast to dive into
All right,
my back
moving
issues.
on.
Yeah.
I'll let you open these next couple of topics.
Well, this past week, Kyle Larson was quoted as basically saying that he believes he's better than Max Verstappen, especially in a variety of race cars. You know, in F1, obviously wouldn't be the case, but in a variety of different race cars, Kyle Larson believes he could better Max Verstappen. So I have personally held this thought for a while, considering we've watched Kyle Larson just drive so many different things and be so exceptional at every one of them. And the reason this thought popped in my head was I was on like a podcast or something, maybe not this one. Or was it this one? I can't remember. Nonetheless, I basically made this statement months ago. And then I saw Kyle at Talladega, and we were having a conversation. I told him how I said, "Hey man, I think in a variety of race cars in a competition, you'd beat Max Verstappen." He was like, "Oh man, I haven't thought about it. Thanks for that. I appreciate it." And then I see this quote, and I'm like, "Ooh, I hope I didn't like set that in his brain."
You planted the seed.
But the part that's interesting to me is it obviously became a huge debate across Twitter and the motorsports world, and obviously the F1 fans defending Max, and you have the U.S. racing fans defending Larson, and so on and so forth. It became a bit of a shouting match. But I love the debate because I think it's fun and it's never going to happen, right? There's never going to be a way to do this correctly, getting 5 race cars that are perfectly unique to each other's driving styles and what they have as experience-wise. But I thought it's a fun discussion to say, like, hey, these are the 2 best drivers in the world right now. What would it be like to see them go to head-to-head? What would be the competition, right? My thought is 5 cars, something along the lines of like a GT car, a Formula car, I wouldn't do a stock car, an F1 car. I would try to stay away from what they actually predominantly do. Maybe dirt, maybe a trophy truck or something, and you'd have some sort of like competition in which they would go lap time, race each other, all sorts of stuff, right?
No, I think you want to see him in a Cup car and a F1 car at some point. I agree with like putting them in a bunch of different scenarios, and actually the right way to do it is here's how you do it. Here's how you do it. I'm thinking of this real time. You pick the different cars that you want them to race, and then you enter them in actual races, but against each other, like not some head-to-head one-on-one showdown on Speed Channel.
Like a 5 race thing across a variety of racing series.
Yeah, like if one of them is a dirt street stock, then we're going to Benton County Speedway in Vinton, Iowa on a Sunday night.
How many
and we're
tickets?
putting them in street stocks and starting them at the back of the field.
I think millions of people would tune in around the world to watch this competition.
And then you're going to watch Max Verstappen and Kyle Larson cut through the field in street stocks on a dirt track against your local heroes.
Can I offer?
And then the next week we're going to run.
You can't, sorry.
Oh,
And then next week we're going to run, high downforce, whatever, at a country club or whatever they race at on a weekly basis, or some like GT, I don't know, some kind of organized race, an actual event. They're just jumping in.
so
And then the cherry on top, let me finish this last thought. Then the cherry on top is they do a seat swap deal with a Cup car and an F1 car.
See who's closer to a certain time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Josh, go ahead. You seem
So
really wanting to get in there.
you guys are saying something that sounds very similar to something that I've seen online before, and they typically use it for gamer competitions where you're competing 2 gamers against each other to find out who is the better gamer. And you have neutral games, and then you have games that the driver or the gamer would pick that would advantage them. So you could have 6 disciplines. Kyle Larson would probably pick dirt, and then NASCAR. Max would pick open wheel F1 and karting, and then you have 2 neutral ones, both that they haven't competed in. And then the loser of the previous round chooses which discipline that they are going to compete in next, and the first to insert number here wins.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, that's exactly how it's. You did it better, Josh, but that's exactly what I was thinking. So that is an interesting competition. It will never happen Actually, never say never, but in any way that would actually make sense or be valid. I will say there is a certain international driver who did text me after my statement about this and said that he had seen Max Verstappen in a rally car and was quite rapid, and also his GT cars that he owns, and he was quite fast, and it was very impressive. So the other thing that's funny that people didn't get when I tweet about this, saying that Larson and Max are kind of cut from the same cloth, is that Max is not allowed to race anything else through his contract in F1. He can't go do other stuff. But he does sim racing. So he races sim racing 24/7, and obviously he does it on the race weekends, which we've talked about. Larson is allowed to go race dirt and other things, and so he goes and does it. And I was like, they're basically the same person. They both race 24/7, just one has to do it virtually and one does it for real. But to me, the level that Max does it virtually is so insane that I'm like, it's no different than being in a real race car. So we'll see. That will continue, but I'm team Larson until I see otherwise. I will say I saw Larson, personally I've seen Larson do things in a car that, and I said this to some people, I said, I've raced against Kyle Busch and guys like that, and I see them do things, and I'm like, okay, like I think I can do that. I watched Larson do something about a year ago, and I thought, I don't know how he did that. I don't know how he did it time after lap. And I sat there and I'm like, that I've never had that happen. And that was one of the more like eye-opening moments for me in terms of just like, that's the best driver in the world right there. So I'll leave it there. Speaking of good drivers, AJ Allmendinger, he's going back to Cup. That was announced last week. He wanted that to happen. He had told me for a while that he really, really wanted to go back to Cup. So he will be back in Cup full-time in 2025. Yeah. News to you, apparently.
Yeah, I didn't even know.
The podcast on the
breaking news
on the
to the
pulse.
host of the podcast. Wow, interesting. Well, it's news to me. He wanted to go back to Cup. Like that's what.
Oh yeah. Yes, he had said to me multiple times he wanted to go back to Cup. So he preferred it. He was like, "Look, if I'm going to do this, at his experience level and his age, he should be at the top, and his ability to win. I mean, he won a Cup race last year. The guy's a winner. Why not be at the highest level doing it?" So, I get it. All right, we can move back to the Xfinity Series. All of you, we promised at the beginning. Yes, my team, Big Machine Racing, was hit with an L1 penalty today for a pre-race spoiler infraction. We did lose 5 playoff points, of which we have 1, so we're -4 at the current moment, and 20 regular season points. So we went from 36 points to the good over the cut line to now we are 16 points going into Daytona. Now, remember, for the Xfinity Series, we actually have 5 races left, where Cup has 2 before their playoffs start. We have 5. So we have Daytona, Darlington, Atlanta, Watkins Glen, and Bristol, which are obviously all great tracks for us. And so that, it hurts. It's kind of a slap across the face for all the hard work you put in the season, and just bam, one fellow blow. It's like, oh, there's all those points we gained.
What can you share about the infraction?
I really don't. So full transparency, I don't know anything. Like, I don't know this stuff, and I don't get involved, and I don't ask questions. And so, car stuff, this, especially tech and everything, yes, I am.
Blah,
know
blah. Okay,
I know the basics.
Yeah,
no. Shove off. Hold on. I know the basics, but I don't know particulars. Okay, you just text Patrick. Yeah, there you go. You just text him.
I just wanted to tell my story of the best spoiler infraction that I know of, because spoiler is something that NASCAR does not like that you touch, and the fact that it was an L1 is actually not huge, right? It's the higher numbers are the bad ones.
No, I think the L1 is the high one.
I know, but is Patrick suspended?
No, $25,000 fine.
I wonder why he's not suspended.
I don't know. But you know what we needed? You know what we were missing?
What?
SpoilerDiecast.com. That would have solved it for us.
That would have been a good transition if I could have gotten you to do this. Speaking of spoilers. So anyway, maybe NASCAR doesn't do a lot of suspensions in Xfinity because they know they're smaller teams and stuff. I can't remember. Maybe there's something to do with that. But either way, does anybody remember 2008 Chad Walter at Hendrick?
With the bolts?
It was
this?
It was a Junior Motorsports, actually.
Oh, no, I don't know this one.
So they cut. So back in the old Busch cars or Xfinity car, they were nationwide cars back then.
Oh, wait, by the way, update. L3 is the most severe. L1 is the least
that's
severe.
what I'm saying. So
okay, I can't.
Whatever you guys did must have been obviously illegal, but maybe NASCAR didn't look at it as like a horribly illegal thing to do, horrible thing to do.
I don't know. Everything Big Machine Racing does is perfect.
What the hell did you do?
So, Big Machine Racing is perfect. So
actually,
I don't know.
Patrick, I know you're listening. Just text me. Tell me what you did. So, back on the old Busch cars, the deck lid, there was some spoiler that overlapped the quarter panels. So it was like,
yes.
which actually I think the Xfinity cars still have that too.
Kind of.
Where there's a little bit of spoiler that overlaps the deck lid.
Yep.
The quarter panels on both sides.
Yes.
So if you raised the deck lid, there was like about 4 inches on either side of spoiler overlap. So what Chad Walter had his team do was cut the bottom of the spoiler shorter. So and then they filled it in with Bondo and then painted it the same color as the spoiler.
Oh my gosh.
So it looked like a regular spoiler when it was up. And then when they put it down, they took their, by hand, they just broke the Bondo out and then shoved the deck lid down farther because now there's less spoiler, right? So instead of spoiler being like this and sitting on top of the deck lid, there's this much spoiler, and it just shoved it down. So the spoiler was like another 3/8 of an inch lower. That is a penalty that will get you a vacation.
Did he get a vacation?
He got 6 weeks for that one.
6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yep, that's pretty intense.
Yeah, he got in trouble for that one. Not cool.
That's some
NASCAR
serious ingenuity.
Spoilers at super speedways, tires, restrictor plates, fuel. Those are like the sacred.
Yeah, don't touch them.
touchies.
Motors.
Yeah, motors.
You just don't touch it. So, last thing, we mentioned the package for the Xfinity Series this past weekend was the same package as Indianapolis, which is this low horsepower, normal intermediate downforce setup, which is low downforce. I think this package is highly dependent on temperature, and my point being that Indy, if it was 40 degrees cooler at Indy, it would have been a draft fest. We'd have run almost wide open, not wide open, but you would have seriously drafted with the grip level and such. It was a hot, sunny day. We didn't do that. We were all lifting. Even I was braking in the corners at Indy. And then it did cause a great finish between the Stewart-Haas cars and the Joe Gibbs Racing car of Eric Almirola at Indy, so that was cool. At Michigan, same thing. I think if it was a cloudy, cold day, we would have had a serious drafting race. In a hot day like we had, you had to lift too much. It's just not the grip. With the low horsepower, it then just becomes a game of who can carry the throttle longest. And your decision on downforce versus drag. And, some of us were really trimmed out, some were full downforce. And, that was a decision to be made. But I think this package, to me, it struggles in the idea that it's so temperature dependent. If we just had our normal intermediate horsepower motors that past weekend, you would have saw a typical Xfinity race that maybe 2 or 3 cars, which you basically had anyway, were up front, but they had the full horsepower. The tires would fall off a certain way, and you drove it and braked and lifted and that sort of stuff instead of trying to carry a ton of throttle like a truck when you're alone, and then in traffic having to lift and try to time runs and bump drafting as much as we did. So I think there's more to be discovered with this one. I don't think this was a win this past weekend. I'll be honest. I don't think so. And I don't think it was a big win at Indy either. I think they would both be big wins if you could guarantee that it was 60 degrees and cloudy. But you can't guarantee that in the summer, in August, in Michigan or Indianapolis. You got any thoughts?
I think it's I don't think it's a win or a loss. I think it's okay. Maybe that makes it a loss.
Wow, what a statement. You really go on a limb with that one.
I just think I think what Michigan
I'm
is
the guy over
missing
here
is a
getting-
really good tire.
But getting,
You know, the track has raced.
fractions.
The track has raced the same for a decade since they paved it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
One racing lane. There's a passing lane that is, you know, a low percentage move to actually make the pass. But it's a raceable track. But it's just funny how they've never. There's something about the pavement they put down on that track and the speeds that we see for 10 years has never allowed Goodyear to bring a tire that will lay rubber and that will open up the groove.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Like it's like
They
the
even had
speeds are
resin.
so high, the track
still
is so
doesn't.
smooth, it's been durable, it's put out a lot of grip. So Goodyear has been put in a box, you know, and I'm being charitable to Goodyear right now, but I think that's fair. I think those speeds and all that grip and all that that happens at Michigan since the repave has put Goodyear in a box where they have to bring a durable tire.
Yep.
Right? And when you have to bring a durable tire, you give up a ton of raceability. And so as a result, for 10 years of what you would think would be aging on the pavement, right, and hard winters and all this stuff, has not resulted in any different racing product than the day they paved the place.
Yeah, except we're going about 20 mile an hour slower down the straightaway, even at 205.
I know, but it
No,
doesn't.
but I know what you're saying.
It looks the
it's
same.
barely opened up, and even with the resin, the third groove barely comes in, and a lot of
Barely.
times and you know why it doesn't come in? Look at the damn distance you have to do when you're up there. What people don't realize is that if you run the bottom of 3 and 4 compared to the top, the distance
I know,
between
but
the two.
This is even before your time. I had the pleasure of racing there on the old pavement. In fact, Michigan was one of the first tracks that I
excuse
drove
me.
on.
Excuse me, I won a race on the old pavement.
Who got me there? But I've actually raced there in a cup car on the old pavement.
Wow. Oh,
And-
should we just start measuring?
Yeah, let's just start measuring. So, and,
Hey,
and
Josh,
I've,
get a measuring
I've,
stick real
I've
quick.
I ran the top there, like, and followed the wall all the way around the track. Right?
Wow, that's it.
That's a long ways around. I've ran the top at Michigan.
That's actually amazing. I never.
And
did that.
if you, go now, it makes me want to go back and look at old footage of Dale Jr. and running the top at Michigan. They used to do that.
Yeah.
That was a thing.
I remember he taught Harvick, didn't he, how to do it?
Yeah, so
That was cool.
it's possible. I mean, hell, if you can run the top at Fontana,
Yeah, but you had
it's a long ways.
the old
around.
one.
That plays
Yeah,
a
but
2.5
the old-
mile track. It's 3 miles around the top.
Yeah, but you had 3 seconds of fall off. The track
Yeah.
wore it. What I'm saying is that this track is, as you pointed out, has very little fall off. It's still super fast and super grippy. So to go to the top, we're going to have to suddenly have serious fall off because the distance right now is immense. I mean, think about this. I did this hit that's on my Instagram and people have seen all over before the Cup race on Sunday, where they might be doing 200 miles an hour in the Cup car, right around there, a little over 200 miles an hour into turn 1, but their mid corner speed is 185. Min corner speed, 185, which means it's only 15 mile an hour. That's basically lift a little bit. The drag alone of the race car gets you down to 185. Bit of the wheel turn, bam, you're back to throttle.
Yeah,
Like they're not even getting fully out of the throttle. If you're alone in a Cup car at Michigan, you're carrying at least 30 to 50% throttle to the corner
right.
the whole way. So I think, to your point, to get to Old Michigan running the wall, it's just going to have immense fall off, and I don't know how they get there because the surface just doesn't have bumps or any reason that it would wear. So it's one of the same situations we've been at with before Vegas race started to wear out, Charlotte, that sort of thing. So let's move on. Let's talk open wheel. We're done with NASCAR. We've exhausted all NASCAR. Let's talk.
Let's go.
Let's go to IndyCar. Brian, so they raced at Gateway this past weekend. Joseph Newgarden won, but it wasn't without controversy. There was a ton of tempers flaring, including Will Power, who was frustrated with Newgarden after a restart that resulted in him getting in a wreck and multiple cars getting involved. And Brian Herta quoted saying, "There is a growing feeling in the paddock there is not a level playing field." Essentially, the thought process and some of the frustration is that the series is owned by Roger Penske and Penske's companies, and he also has a team that races in the series who happen to win races, who happen to have had infractions earlier this year with the push to pass, who are involved in incidents, and then race control, who technically work for Roger Penske, is having to officiate his own cars. True, false, thoughts? What are we seeing here?
I don't think there's any favoritism. I think that this is like your typical Friday night short track when somebody starts winning, people start complaining that they're cheating. And oddly enough, the Penske guys have gotten busted cheating in recent times, which might have sparked some of these, this mentality. But I don't know. I'm not going to buy into it. I think it's just typical racer mentality to try to cut down on the people that are winning. I mean, never mind that Ganassi has won pretty much every championship in the last several years.
Yep.
Penske's just on it right now. Their oval program is better. So I guess I know that these guys have specific instances that they're trying to point to for officiating, but you could probably, if you wanted to, look at every single judgment call made in a motorsport over the last 100 years and concoct whatever story you want for favoritism and inconsistency in officiating. So I'm not going to buy into it.
Once again, we see an owner or people within the paddock, if the IndyCar series, having problems with Roger Penske's leadership of this series, right? It was the marketing thing before that it's not being marketed appropriately and that sort of thing. I keep going back to the same thought, which is no one else bought it. No offense.
Show me a racing series in the world where the team owners aren't at some kind of adversary
odds with the owner.
The owner of the sanctioning body.
Even
give
F1.
me one.
Everything's roses in F1, but they're not. They're still fighting there.
Yeah, give me one.
It's just, this is normal. This is how it goes. So I think it's an easy out to when you feel like you are being, that there's an unfair playing field or whatever. But at the end of the day, Penske and Ganassi have dominated this series for as long as we've been alive, or at least as adults. And they continue to, and they're the two best teams. And one of them happens to own the series, and it's like, okay, but the two best teams continue to win. Sorry. Okay. I don't know what else to say.
Another way to look at it is like, wait, I'm sorry, what team are we talking about? Oh, Penske. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. And you're saying they needed to do what to win races?
Wait. There's a photo at Penske.
How many races did they win before Roger Penske owned the series? Oh, like 500? Okay.
Oh, like a bajillion. Wait, yeah, there's a photo when I was at Penske in the main boardroom when you went in where it's Roger looking down on you from the end of a boardroom table in a full suit, and he's lined by all the Indy 500 trophies. At the time, I think it was like 15 or 14. Now they're up to 17 or something or more. And a lot of those happened before he owned the series. So we'll see. That's just something to continue to track in the IndyCar world, but I think it's probably much ado about nothing, and once again, no one else offered to buy the series. One great part that happened that I don't see on our thing, but I got to point it out because it's incredible. Buddy of ours, Dylan Welch, goes for the interview with Will Power after he wrecks in that wreck, and you visibly see Will Power give a gesture to his teammate, Joseph Dugard, and then Dylan is on the camera going up to be like, hey, man, can we get an interview? And you can visibly see Will say something not quite accepting the interview, and then you see him realize, man, that was kind of mean, and then he kind of comes back, and then they do the interview, and he's like, I'm happy now. That's
he's a nice guy.
So yeah, I mean, he was just hot, but it was pretty awesome to see. Our buddy Conor Daly, back in the IndyCar series, gets to jump in the 78 for Juncos Hollinger for the remainder of the season. Didn't get the best race this past weekend, was involved in one of those wrecks, but good to see him back in the car, getting a chance. Let's talk F1 quickly. Some news that Pete Bono, as they call him, Bonnington, won't be going with Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari as he's been promoted at Mercedes. He's now the head of race engineering and will continue to engineer Hamilton until the end of 2024. He will also engineer a driver in 2025, whoever that is. So it's kind of like, I guess the best way to explain the race engineer for people that are more NASCAR, that's like the crew chief. That's your crew chief in F1. So that's who you as a driver work the closest with in terms of car setup, strategy, so on and so forth, and they make the ultimate decision. Head of it, race engineering would be like essentially a competition director for a NASCAR team. So he'll be doing dual roles, which happens in NASCAR as well. We see competition directors and also crew chiefs. So that does happen. But
That's hard to do, though.
definitely, you got to think about both cars, but then your car as well. That's tough.
I can't say that I've seen that happen to great success.
I think it's like anything. If you're going to do it, it's got to be the sole focus. If you're going to do it the best, right? It's hard to mix anything.
I think that if I would say, though, because of how F1 teams typically operate, I think that F1 is a good environment for that type of setup.
Yes.
Compared
I
to
can
NASCAR.
see that. Yep, because the car...
Because NASCAR teams operate, even in the most... We had a conversation about this on the pod. But even in the most team-like atmospheres in a NASCAR organization, the teams are still pretty separate with their own identities, their own styles, their own setups, right? They even with it in a one team, one dream culture, they still operate pretty independently. Where F1, it doesn't even seem that way. In the best case of F1, especially the best for Parker, the way that you believe an F1 team should operate, it is literally one team, one dream, one car, one dream, right? The second car is the support car.
Yeah. And it's because it always goes back to the pit stop situation. You have to prioritize one of the cars. So
this could work.
I think it's that's just the way F1 is, and it's always going to be unless they add more pit crews, but they're not gonna. It's the way it's designed. So,
I mean, at the end of the day, let me just leave you with the one-liner.
Oh, please do.
It's like,
we'll clip it.
What? Hey, if Mercedes, believes that he's their best decision maker, have your best decision maker on the box. That tells me that's the decision they're making here.
Yep.
He's the smartest guy, so they want him in charge of development. He knows the direction where they believe in his vision for the cars, and he's the best decision maker. So let's put him on the box.
I see that. No doubt.
Why not have both?
Yep. If he's a smart guy, and to keep him, don't let him go to Ferrari. Give him the promotion, right? So
similar,
Lewis will be on his own.
We've seen. I might be stretching here. I know we've been. This is a long podcast, but just
never
kind of like
too
Chris
long.
Rice
People want
running
more.
Kaulig Racing the way he has, but had himself in a crew chief role for a long time.
Yep.
Now that's sort of an old version of Kaulig Racing. That's not even necessarily the version of Kaulig Racing that I experienced because every team when I was at Kaulig had a crew chief.
Yep.
But I mean, hell, he pretty much crew chiefed cars and ran the team to a pretty high degree of success for a while. So
yeah,
I don't know.
It happens. I mean, teams are like that. It's especially people who have a lot of experience. I think it's possible that they can do that. Now, I always do believe though it can get fractured, especially with multiple cars. A single car team very doable, but multiple cars is where it gets too fractured.
Well,
for that
and
to
this
be
is
something.
the last note to leave you with is to take this
down
to the
wasn't
human.
the last line.
The last actual point that I'll make about this is to take this down to the actual human, regular person level. To those of you who are listening, driving to work or you're at work or whatever, it's it is. These are still humans, right? I know they're racers and we're watching them on TV and everything, but they only have so many hours in the day to do their job, right? And anybody that's looked at an org chart, if you work in any kind of organized company, what Mercedes is doing with him is putting his name on two places in the org chart, right? There's only so many hours in the day.
Yep.
And so, in my experience in NASCAR, it just doesn't work because you can't do great at both. But maybe in an F1 team, you can.
Yeah. And think, to put it in our context, this is kind of like if Jimmy left Hendrick and left Chad at the time. You know, they end up splitting before he left Hendrick. But that's kind of what Bono is to Lewis Hamilton. You know, two guys who've had a seriously successful run. So for Lewis going to Ferrari, he's going to have a lot of new. It's going to be a big, tall task that he's taking on there. We'll see how it goes. Sad news in the racing world this past weekend. Scott Bloomquist, the dirt racing legend, and legend of, in a lot of ways, of just social media folk hero, passed away after a fatal aircraft crash, which Tyler Reddick was close with him and had worked with him and was a mentor of his, tributed in his win at Michigan. So sad news for the dirt world. That guy, it didn't matter where you were racing since I've been in NASCAR or even in USAC or ever, everyone had a Scott Bloomquist story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm sad to say that I did not know Scott. Never met him. Never was around.
I didn't either.
As long as
Never
I was
met him
around
either.
racing.
Yep.
I have worked with some great dirt racers and dirt late model sprint cars. I've been around all kinds of racing in my life. I feel like I know everybody in the sport sometimes. I did not know Scott, but I was a fan of his. I always pulled for him when I was a kid. I loved hearing stories about him. He was, man, not to make this about myself, but it's just like, gosh, he was to me what I think he just was to everybody. He was like this mythical creature, right? Because I never met him. I didn't get to know the human Scott Bloomquist. I only knew the mythical creature, this legend of Scott Bloomquist. And so it was always these weird stories of like what kind of guy he was. And that's what he was to every race fan and every, it's like, man, he's something else. So
No doubt.
yeah, rest in peace. What a legend. You have to go back.
Well said.
The beautiful thing about the world now is I think I could probably spend a weekend rabbit hole on YouTube watching some old videos of him and I don't know, brush up on some Bloomquist history.
Really well said, and I think it's just, it didn't matter where or when or who, if that name came up, someone's like, hey, have you heard this one? It's like, and it was always epic. It was like, that's insane, that's amazing. Whether it was winning on three wheels, which he, I think, recently did in the last, 2 years.
Yep.
To
or aliens in his yard.
Aliens in his yard, to, party antics and such. It was, I think that guy got the fullest out of his life. So rest in peace, Scott, and thoughts with his family and friends. So sad loss for the motorsports world. Josh here, before we move on from this pod, Josh has posted something in our notes as we were doing this, and it says, the last team to get an L1 penalty at Michigan went on to win the championship. Cole Custer, Splitter, 2023. Love that one, Josh. Let's go. Sending that directly to the team right now. That's epic. All right. Well, Vegas, you might want to shift your betting odds. We're going to go 2 for 2 on this one. This weekend ahead, we mentioned it. We got the Daytona weekend for NASCAR. We're racing the Xfinity Series on Friday night. We got Saturday night is the 400-mile race for which used to be called the Firecracker 400, no longer. For the Cup Series, you've got World Superbike in Hungary, the Dutch Grand Prix for F1, and we have IndyCar in Portland. So it's a packed weekend of racing ahead. Oh, no, Landon. Can you believe this?
I can.
We got so into all these conversations that we had Kyle Busch in the waiting room this entire time. Never thought to get to him. And because of this, and really he just had a real change in form, I don't want to break that for him. So we're just going to have to let him go. Kyle, here's the deal. We're going to get you on next week. We promise it's going to happen, but it's just not going to happen this week. So, sorry, buddy. Peace. Thanks for watching and listening. Thanks for listening or watching. If you want to be heard on this show, go to moneylap.com to leave us a voicemail. Be funny, be irreverent, or be insightful, but don't be dumb. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. That helps us grow. And if you're listening, please leave us a 5-star review to be featured on this show. Follow us on X, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We'll see you there.